To our amazing viewers at Infidelity Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Architect. Maxwell Riggs Donovan wasn't a man who believed in second chances. As one of Boston's most respected structural engineers, he built his reputation on precision, foresight, and an uncompromising demand for excellence. Buildings didn't get second chances. They either stood or they fell. People were no different in Riggs' worldview. On the crisp autumn morning when he received his daughter Serena's wedding invitation, Riggs was finalizing plans for the Horizon Tower, his most ambitious project to date. The 50-story masterpiece would redefine the city's skyline and cement his legacy as a visionary in his field. "Congratulations, boss," said Damon Wells, Riggs' project manager and the closest thing he had to a friend. "Your little girl's getting married. But you've got a hell of a father of the bride speech planned." Riggs' weathered face creased slightly at the corners of his mouth. Been working on it for 29 years. Though he seldom spoke of his personal life at work, Riggs had always maintained a special bond with Serena. When his son Tyler had followed in his mother Vanessa's footsteps, pursuing a career in real estate development rather than engineering, Riggs had been disappointed. But Serena had inherited his analytical mind and determination. She'd become a brilliant architect, and while they often clashed professionally, their mutual respect ran deep. That evening, Riggs arrived home to the sprawling colonial home in Brookline he'd designed himself 15 years earlier. Vanessa greeted him with a glass of bourbon, her emerald dress hugging curves that still caught his eye after 32 years of marriage. "We need to talk about the wedding," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone he'd come to recognize as trouble. "What about it?" Riggs took a slow sip, savoring the burn. "Serena wants everything perfect." Vanessa fidgeted with her pearl necklace, his anniversary gift from 3 years ago. "There's been some discussion about the reception speeches." "Discussion?" Riggs set his glass down harder than necessary. "About my speech?" Vanessa's hesitation told him everything. "She's worried you'll be too critical. You know how you can be, Riggs. Professional. Cole, professional is what paid for that necklace," Riggs replied evenly. "And I've been writing this speech since she was born." The wedding planner suggested limiting speeches to lighten the program. Tyler's toast, the maid of honor, and the best man. That's it. Riggs saw the lie in her eyes. Vanessa had never been good at deception. Something deeper was happening, but he simply nodded. "I see." That night, as Vanessa slept beside him, Riggs checked her phone. The password hadn't changed since Serena's birth year. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Dozens of messages between Vanessa and Bradford Coleman, a real estate tycoon who had been circling Riggs' professional life for years. The texts weren't just business. They were intimate, conspiratorial. One exchange caught his eye. "Vanessa, he'll make a scene if we exclude him from speaking." "Bradford, your husband has controlled the narrative long enough. It's time for a change." "Our change." Riggs placed the phone back precisely as he'd found it. He didn't confront Vanessa. That wasn't his style. Instead, he began to formulate a blueprint, not for a building, but for something far more permanent: justice. Chapter 2. The Blueprint. For 3 decades, Riggs had built his marriage on what he believed was solid ground. Now he discovered the foundation was rotten. The revelation that Bradford Coleman, a man he'd competed against professionally for years, was involved with his wife wasn't just a betrayal. It was a structural failure of catastrophic proportions. Coleman Development had always been the flashy alternative to Riggs' methodical approach. Bradford built quickly, with emphasis on luxury amenities over lasting quality. His properties commanded premium prices, but often developed problems within years. Riggs had privately referred to him as the facade for years. Now Bradford was trying to construct something with Vanessa, and, clearly, the wedding was part of their plan. The next morning, Riggs began his investigation with the same meticulous attention to detail he brought to his engineering projects. He hired Thomas Klein, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion. "I don't need photos of them together," Riggs instructed. "I need to understand their blueprint. How long has this been happening? Who knows about it? And most importantly, what are they planning? Klein delivered his report within a week. The affair had been ongoing for nearly 2 years, beginning shortly after Bradford had approached Vanessa's real estate firm to market his new properties. More disturbing were the financial implications. Vanessa had been quietly siphoning money from their joint accounts into a separate one. Nearly $3 million had vanished over 18 months. Most revealing was the connection to Serena's fiancé, Alan Pierce. The young lawyer worked for Bradford's company, handling property acquisitions. Their daughter's relationship had been no coincidence. Alan had been deliberately placed in Serena's orbit at a charity function Vanessa had insisted they attend. The final blow came when Klein revealed that Tyler wasn't just aware of the affair. He was actively helping his mother and Bradford, having been promised a leadership position in a new joint venture between Coleman Development and his mother's real estate company. "And my daughter?" Riggs asked, his voice betraying no emotion. "She appears genuinely in love with Pierce," Klein answered. "But she's aware of your wife's relationship with Coleman. She's torn, but her mother has convinced her that you've been emotionally absent for years. The decision to exclude your speech was made after a family meeting you weren't invited to." Riggs nodded and paid Klein his fee plus a substantial bonus. Then he returned to his home office and opened his safe. Inside was a leather-bound journal he'd maintained for decades, a detailed record of every project, every investment, and every contingency plan. He turned to a section he'd hoped never to use, titled simply, Structural Failure Protocol. That weekend, Riggs visited his attorney, Monroe Davidson, an imposing man who'd handled his legal affairs for 20 years. "I need everything ready but nothing filed," Riggs explained. "When I give the signal, I want it all to happen simultaneously." Davidson studied the documents Riggs had prepared. "This is comprehensive. Nuclear even. Are you certain? When a structure is compromised beyond repair, controlled demolition is the only responsible option," Riggs replied. "Your wife's family has influence," Davidson warned. "The Sullivans won't take this lying down. Let them stand up, then they can fall with the rest." As Riggs left the attorney's office, his phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. "Family dinner tonight. We need to discuss the wedding seating arrangements." Riggs texted back, looking forward to it. That evening, he sat at his dining table surrounded by traitors, smiling and discussing trivial wedding details while the weight of his knowledge pressed down like a collapsing beam. Tyler boasted about a new development project. Serena avoided his eyes. Vanessa touched his hand occasionally, a performance for their children. "Dad," Serena finally said, "about the reception speeches." "Your mother mentioned it," Riggs replied calmly. "I understand." The relief on their faces disgusted him. "Really?" Tyler couldn't hide his surprise. "Of course." Riggs smiled. "It's Serena's day. Everything should be exactly as she wants." Later, as he worked in his study, Serena knocked tentatively on the door. "Dad, are you really okay with not giving a speech?" Riggs looked at his daughter, her dark hair and analytical eyes so like his own. For a moment, he considered warning her, saving her from what was coming. But he recognized the calculation behind her concern. She wasn't worried about his feelings. She was ensuring the plan would proceed smoothly. "I've always taught you that adaptation is essential in design," he said. "Sometimes the original blueprint has to change." She hugged him, misinterpreting his words as acceptance. Over her shoulder, Riggs saw Vanessa watching from the hallway, a smile of victory on her lips. That night, he made the first revisions to his own blueprint. Chapter 3, Groundwork. The 8 weeks before Serena's wedding passed in a carefully orchestrated performance. Riggs played the role of the supportive but slightly distant father, exactly as they expected. He attended tuxedo fittings, nodded approvingly at flower arrangements, and wrote a check for $175,000 to the Vermont Mountain Resort where the ceremony would take place. "That's considerably more than we discussed," Vanessa remarked when she saw the amount. "Nothing but the best for Serena," Riggs replied. "Besides, I'm not giving a speech. Consider it compensation." Behind this facade of acceptance, Riggs was laying his groundwork. He made 3 key moves. First, he invited Bradford Coleman to his office under the pretense of discussing a potential collaboration. The man arrived with the confident swagger of someone who believed he'd already won. Riggs, didn't expect to receive your call. Thought you preferred working solo. Times change, Riggs replied, offering his rival expensive scotch. We're about to be connected through my daughter and your employee. Seems wise to establish a relationship. Bradford's relief was palpable. He clearly believed Riggs remained ignorant of the affair. I've always admired your structural precision, even if I find your designs a bit conservative. Conservative builds last centuries. Flashy builds make headlines. They discussed a fictitious joint venture, with Riggs suggesting a significant investment in Coleman's newest development. Bradford left with a handshake and a promise of future discussions, completely unaware that Riggs had recorded every word and sent copies to several of Bradford's investors who had been questioning recent financial discrepancies. Second, Riggs transferred the majority of his liquid assets, nearly $30 million, into accounts that Vanessa couldn't access, protected by a complex legal structure Davidson had established. Third, and most crucial, he visited Clayton Foster, owner of the Vermont resort where Serena's wedding would take place. The check I provided has a condition, Riggs explained, sliding a document across Foster's desk. Payment will be released in 2 installments. Half now, half immediately after the reception begins, provided these instructions are followed precisely. Foster reviewed the document with growing concern. Mr. Donovan, this is highly unusual. So is my situation. Riggs placed a second check on the table. This one made out personally to Foster, with more zeros than the man likely saw in a year. Consider this a convenience fee. 2 days before the wedding, the entire family traveled to Vermont. Riggs noted how Tyler and Vanessa exchanged glances whenever they thought he wasn't looking. He observed how Alan Pierce, Serena's fiancé, deferred subtly to Bradford Coleman, who had arrived with his entourage and taken a suite near the bridal party. That night, as the rehearsal dinner concluded, Vanessa finally revealed what he'd been waiting for. Riggs, we need to talk, she said, drawing him away from the gathering. In a quiet corner of the resort's terrace, with mountains looming in the darkness beyond, she delivered the blow they'd been planning for months. We've all decided you shouldn't speak at the reception, she announced, her eyes showing not guilt but determination. No one wants to hear from you. Your speeches always make people uncomfortable. Serena wants her day to be perfect. For a moment, he let genuine pain show on his face, not because of their decision, but because of the calculated cruelty behind it. This public humiliation had been designed as the first step in a larger plan. Then he nodded and said simply, "Understood." His apparent acceptance seemed to unnerve Vanessa more than any argument would have. "You're not upset? It's Serena's day," he repeated, the phrase becoming his shield. Later that night, he canceled one check, the second payment to the resort, with a single phone call. "Mr. Foster? Riggs Donovan. Implement the contingency plan we discussed. The second payment won't be coming." As he ended the call, he noticed Bradford watching him from across the lobby. Riggs raised his glass in a silent toast. Tomorrow, the demolition would begin. Chapter 4. Structural Collapse. The wedding morning dawned with perfect clarity over the Vermont mountains. Riggs stood on his suite's balcony, overlooking the manicured grounds where white chairs were arranged in precise rows. Workers were putting final touches on a floral arch where Serena would soon exchange vows with a man who was part of the conspiracy against him. At precisely 9:30 a.m., his phone chimed with an incoming message. It was from Davidson, all documents filed as instructed. Sequence initiated. Riggs replied with a single word, "Proceed." He dressed meticulously in his custom-tailored tuxedo, adjusting his cufflinks, platinum, engraved with his initials, a gift from Serena on his 50th birthday. The irony wasn't lost on him. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Riggs walked Serena down the aisle, her arm trembling slightly on his. Whether from excitement or guilt, he couldn't tell. He played his part perfectly, answering her "mother and I do" when asked who gives this woman in marriage. He even managed to shake Alan's hand with convincing warmth before taking his seat beside Vanessa. "You're being very mature about all this," she whispered as the vows began. I've had time to reflect on what matters, he replied. The reception began at 3 p.m. in the resort's grand ballroom. 200 guests sipped champagne and admired the extravagant decorations. Riggs noted with professional appreciation the structural elegance of the space. Exposed beams arching overhead, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the mountain vista. Tyler gave his toast first, raising a glass to his sister with practiced charm. To Serena and Alan, may your foundation be strong. The architectural metaphor made Riggs smile thinly. His son had always been derivative. The maid of honor followed, then the best man. Riggs sat quietly, nodding at appropriate moments. Vanessa repeatedly squeezed his hand in apparent gratitude for his composure. At 4:47 p.m., exactly as the dessert course was being served, Clayton Foster entered the ballroom with 2 members of his staff. He approached the head table and whispered something to the wedding planner, whose face immediately drained of color. Serena noticed the commotion. What's happening? Within minutes, the whispers had spread throughout the room. Bradford Coleman rose from his table and approached Foster, his expression darkening as they conversed. Then Serena's phone began to ring. And ring again. She checked the screen with growing alarm. Dad, the resort manager says there's a problem with the payment. They're saying the check was canceled. All eyes turned to Riggs, who calmly sipped his champagne. Dad, the panic in Serena's voice was real now. Did you cancel the payment? Riggs set down his glass. I did. The silence that fell over the nearby tables was absolute. Why would you do that? Vanessa hissed, her composure cracking. Structural integrity, Riggs replied. When a foundation is compromised, everything built upon it eventually collapses. Foster approached their table. Mr. Donovan, we need to discuss this immediately. The resort requires full payment, or I'm afraid the reception cannot continue. Serena's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Dad, fix this. Now. I'm afraid I can't do that, Riggs said, rising to his feet. He addressed not just his daughter, but the entire stunned gathering. I won't be giving a speech today. No one wants to hear from me, after all. But actions have always spoken louder than words. He turned to Foster. I believe our agreement included a second option. Foster nodded uncomfortably. Yes, sir. If the guests wish to continue the reception, individual payment arrangements will need to be made immediately. Otherwise, we'll need to close the bar and end food service. The murmurs of shock rippled through the crowd. Bradford Coleman stepped forward, his businessman's instincts taking over. I'll cover it, whatever the balance is. Foster shook his head. I'm afraid the remaining balance is substantial, Mr. Coleman. And Mr. Donovan left specific instructions that no payment from you or Mrs. Donovan would be accepted. As the chaos unfolded, Riggs walked calmly toward the exit. Serena rushed after him, grabbing his arm. Why are you ruining my wedding? Riggs looked into his daughter's eyes. Ask your mother about Bradford Coleman. Ask your fiancé who really got him his position. Ask your brother about the real estate venture they've been planning. The color drained from Serena's face. What are you talking about? The truth, Riggs replied. Something in short supply in this family lately. His phone rang. Serena's number, though she stood right before him. He showed her the screen, then declined the call. That will be the first of 34 calls you'll make to me today. I won't answer any of them. As he walked away, Bradford reached him. Donovan, you can't do this. We can work something out. We already have, Riggs replied, handing him an envelope. My attorney filed these papers an hour ago. I thought you might want a preview. Bradford opened the envelope, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he scanned the documents. These allegations are baseless. You'll never prove. I've spent my career ensuring structures don't fail. Riggs cut him off. When they do, I document exactly why. I've documented everything, Bradford. Everything. As Riggs walked out of the ballroom, Vanessa caught up to him in the lobby. Whatever you think you know. 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days, Riggs interrupted. That's how long your affair with Bradford has been going on. That's how long you've been planning to leave me once you'd secured enough of my assets. That's how long you've been poisoning our children against me. Vanessa's facade finally cracked. You've always been cold, Riggs. Calculating. Bradford makes me feel alive. Feel alive with him, then. but you'll do it without the life I built. He left her standing in the lobby, her carefully applied makeup streaking with tears of rage, not remorse. As he drove away from the resort, his phone lit up repeatedly with incoming calls from Serena, Tyler, and Vanessa. By evening, the news would reach them all. Divorce papers filed citing adultery, financial malfeasance exposed, company partnerships dissolved, and trusts revoked. The demolition had begun. Chapter 5. Controlled Demolition. The media explosion hit by morning. Riggs had spent the night in a small inn 50 miles from the resort, watching as his meticulous plan unfolded through news alerts and frantic messages from family and business associates alike. Coleman Development stocks plummet amid fraud allegations. Donovan divorce rocks Boston elite. Wedding day revelation. Riggs had expected the public attention. In fact, he'd carefully engineered it. What he hadn't anticipated was the call from Lillian Sullivan, Vanessa's mother. At 82, the Sullivan family matriarch rarely involved herself in family disputes. "You've made quite a spectacle," she said when Riggs answered. Her voice carried the crisp authority that had intimidated Boston society for decades. "I didn't start this, Lillian." "No, but you've certainly escalated it. The Sullivans have endured worse scandals than this." "This isn't about scandal," Riggs replied. "It's about consequences." There was a long pause before Lillian spoke again. "Vanessa made a terrible mistake, but destroying our entire family in response seems excessive, even for a man of your precision. Your daughter didn't make a mistake. She made a series of calculated decisions over years. So did my son. So did Serena. Serena loves you, Maxwell. She's caught between her mother and you. And she chose her side," Riggs said. "Everyone made their choices. Now they'll live with them." After ending the call, Riggs drove to a small airfield where his private plane waited. Davidson had arranged everything. The pilot asked no questions as they took off, heading not to Boston, but to Seattle, where the second phase of Riggs' plan awaited. In Seattle, Riggs checked into a hotel under an assumed name and made a call to Damon Wells, his loyal project manager. "It's all over the news," Damon said. "The office is in chaos. Implement Protocol B," Riggs instructed. "The files are in my secure server." "All of them?" Damon sounded hesitant. "Every last one. The board meeting is tomorrow at 10 a.m. I want everything ready by 9. While Riggs operated from the shadows, his careful planning continued to decimate the lives of those who had betrayed him. The Coleman Development fraud investigation, triggered by evidence Riggs had compiled and anonymously submitted to regulatory authorities, expanded to include Vanessa's real estate firm. Tyler, who had assumed he would simply transition to working with Bradford, found himself named as a person of interest in the investigation. Alan Pierce, Serena's new husband, was placed on administrative leave from his law firm pending an ethics inquiry after documents revealed he had deliberately pursued Serena as part of Bradford's strategy to gain leverage over Riggs. Serena herself was perhaps the least culpable, but not innocent. Messages Riggs had accessed showed she had known about her mother's affair for months. While initially disapproving, she had eventually been persuaded that her father's emotional distance justified her mother's actions. The wedding reception had ended in humiliation, with guests forced to pay for their own meals and drinks or leave. Several society photographers had captured the chaos, and the images now circulated widely online. On the third day after the wedding, Riggs finally answered a call from Serena. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, her voice raw from crying. "I didn't do this to you," Riggs replied calmly. "I merely responded to what was done to me. By ruining my wedding? By destroying Mom's business? By getting Alan suspended? By revealing the truth. Something you could have done months ago when you first learned about your mother and Bradford." The silence on the line confirmed what he already knew. "You knew," he continued. "You let me walk you down the aisle knowing what they had planned. I thought you'd be better off eventually. Mom said you were never really happy, that you just went through the motions. And that justified betrayal." Serena began to cry. "Dad, please. We can fix this. Come home. Home no longer exists, Serena. And no, this can't be fixed." As he ended the call, his phone immediately lit up with a message from Davidson. "Phase 3 ready on your command." Riggs typed back, "Execute." That evening, Vanessa Donovan received notice that all accounts connected to her had been frozen due to suspected financial improprieties. The $3 million she had diverted was now inaccessible, locked in legal proceedings that would take years to resolve. Bradford Coleman, facing investor panic and regulatory scrutiny, called an emergency press conference to deny any wrongdoing. The evidence Riggs had compiled, recordings, financial records, and intercepted communications, was delivered anonymously to every major news outlet in Boston minutes before Bradford took the podium. In Seattle, Riggs watched the implosion on television, the same way he sometimes watched controlled demolitions of obsolete structures, with professional detachment and a certain grim satisfaction in the precision of it all. Chapter 6: Aftershocks. 1 week after Serena's wedding, Riggs returned to Boston, not to his home in Brookline, but to the penthouse suite of the Horizon Hotel, one of his earliest successful projects. From this vantage point, he could see the construction site of the Horizon Tower, his legacy project, steel beams rising against the skyline. His return did not go unnoticed. Boston's elite, who had been rocked by the scandal, began taking sides. Some saw Riggs as a wronged husband who had responded with justified ruthlessness. Others considered his public demolition of his family's reputation unnecessarily cruel. Lillian Sullivan, ever the strategic matriarch, invited him to her Beacon Hill mansion. Though tempted to decline, Riggs recognized the invitation for what it was, not an attempt at reconciliation, but at damage control. The Sullivan mansion remained unchanged since his first visit there 3 decades earlier. Old money preserved in amber. Lillian received him in her study, an imposing room lined with portraits of Sullivan patriarchs dating back to colonial Boston. "You've made your point," she said without preamble, pouring him a measure of brandy from a crystal decanter. "Now it's time to contain the damage." "I disagree," Riggs replied. "The damage has only begun." Lillian's carefully maintained composure flickered. "What more could you possibly want? Bradford's company is collapsing. Vanessa is effectively bankrupt. Tyler's reputation is in tatters. Serena's marriage is already showing strain. You've won Maxwell. This isn't about winning, Lillian. It's about justice." "Justice?" She almost laughed. "This is vengeance, pure and simple. Call what you want. But it's not complete." Lillian studied him with eyes that had intimidated Boston society for decades. "What are your terms?" "I don't negotiate with conspirators. I had nothing to do with Vanessa's affair or her plans." "But you knew," Riggs countered. "Just like Serena, just like Tyler. You all knew and said nothing." For the first time, a flicker of shame crossed Lillian's aristocratic features. "I advised her against it. I told her no good would come of it. But you didn't warn me. That makes you complicit." Lillian set down her glass with a sharp click against the mahogany desk. "The Sullivans have endured for 300 years in this city because we understand when to cut our losses. Name your price to end this publicly. For the family's sake." "There is no price," Riggs replied. "No settlement. No negotiation. Then why come here at all? To make certain you understand that this isn't something you can manage or contain. Your daughter conspired to destroy everything I built. Now she'll watch as I dismantle the Sullivan legacy in return." The threat hung in the air between them. The Sullivan family holdings were extensive: real estate, investment portfolios, charitable foundations, all now potentially in Riggs' crosshairs. You would punish an entire family for one member's mistakes? Your family has already chosen sides. Riggs rose to leave. "I'm simply honoring their choice." That evening, as Riggs returned to his penthouse, he found Tyler waiting in the lobby. His son looked haggard, the polished exterior that had always come so naturally to him now visibly strained. "Dad," Tyler began, his voice breaking slightly. "We need to talk." Riggs regarded his son impassively. "My attorney handles all communications now." "I'm your son, not a business associate," Tyler protested. "You forfeited that distinction when you helped Bradford and your mother plan against me." Tyler's facade crumbled. "I made a terrible mistake. I thought it would be better for everyone. Mom seemed so unhappy, and Bradford offered me a chance to build something of my own, not just live in your shadow." And that justified betraying your father? No, Tyler admitted, tears forming. Nothing justifies what we did. But Dad, please, this has to stop. The regulatory investigation, the frozen assets, the media coverage, you've made your point. No, I haven't, Riggs replied coldly. But I will. As Tyler realized no apology would suffice, his desperation turned to anger. You're destroying lives. Not just Mom's or Bradford's, but Serena's too. My career is ruined before it even started. Actions have consequences, Riggs said simply. I taught you that from childhood. You chose your actions. Now you'll face the consequences. Riggs stepped around his son and entered the elevator. As the doors closed between them, he saw something shift in Tyler's expression. The final death of hope, replaced by the dawning realization that his father's vengeance would be absolute and uncompromising. Late that night, Riggs received a call from Monroe Davidson. Bradford Coleman tried to leave the country, the attorney informed him. The FBI intercepted him at Logan Airport based on the evidence we provided. And Vanessa? She's attempting to access emergency funds from the Sullivan family trusts. So far, unsuccessfully. Maintain surveillance, Riggs instructed. Phase 4 begins tomorrow. As he ended the call, Riggs walked to the window of his penthouse and gazed out at the city he had helped build, structure by structure. In the distance, spotlights illuminated the rising frame of the Horizon Tower, his masterpiece, designed to stand for centuries. Unlike his marriage, unlike his family, those structures have been built on false foundations, and no engineer could salvage a building once the foundation had failed. Tomorrow would bring the next calculated step in his response. Not revenge. Revenge was emotional, impulsive. This was something else entirely, a precisely engineered collapse. And like all of Riggs' projects, it would be executed with flawless precision. Chapter 7. Cornerstone Removal. Day 14 of Riggs' plan dawned with a series of coordinated actions that sent shockwaves through Boston's business and social circles. First, Donovan Engineering announced a corporate restructuring that effectively removed any project connected to either Coleman Development or Sullivan family interests. Dozens of buildings across the city suddenly lost their structural oversight, a devastating blow in an industry where relationships and reliability were paramount. Second, the Sullivan Family Foundation, the cornerstone of the family's philanthropic image, received notice that their headquarters building, which Riggs had designed and maintained at a token fee for decades, would require immediate and extensive structural reassessment at market rates. Third, and most personally devastating to Vanessa, the children's hospital wing named for her late father, which had been built largely through Riggs' connections and contributions, quietly removed the Sullivan name from its facade overnight. Riggs observed these developments from the boardroom of Donovan Engineering, where he had called an emergency meeting of his executive team. Damon Wells sat at his right hand, the only person in the company fully aware of the comprehensive nature of Riggs' plan. The market is nervous, warned Helena Frost, Riggs' chief financial officer. Our stock has dropped 12% since the wedding incident. It will recover, Riggs replied with certainty. The Sullivan family has significant influence, said Robert Lynn, head of legal affairs. We're already seeing pushback from their allies. Let them push, Riggs responded. Our foundations are solid. After the meeting dispersed, Damon remained behind. The personal cost of this. Have you considered it fully? Riggs regarded his longtime colleague. I calculated everything before I began. Even losing Serena? She's the one who stands to lose the most here. And she's the one who is always most like you. For a brief moment, something vulnerable flickered across Riggs' face. She made her choice, Damon. They all did. That afternoon, the expected meeting request came from an unexpected source. Not Vanessa, not Bradford, not even Lillian Sullivan, but from Alan Pierce, Serena's new husband. Riggs accepted the meeting, curious what approach the young lawyer would take. They met in Riggs' private office at Donovan Engineering, a minimalist space dominated by structural models and architectural drawings. Alan entered with the confidence of a man accustomed to negotiating difficult situations, but Riggs noted the shadows under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hands. Mr. Donovan, thank you for seeing me. Alan began. "I think we've had a serious misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Riggs corrected calmly. "I understand perfectly that you pursued my daughter at Bradford Coleman's direction, with the explicit purpose of gaining access to my family and business." Alan's professional facade cracked slightly. "It wasn't that simple. Yes, I was initially introduced to Serena because of my connection to Coleman Development. But what happened between us was real. Is real. Real enough that you concealed your employer's affair with my wife. Real enough that you participated in excluding me from speaking at my own daughter's wedding." "I was caught in an impossible situation," Alan protested. "I love Serena. I didn't want to hurt her by revealing her mother's actions." Riggs leaned forward. "Then you should have walked away. Instead, you became complicit." "I'm here to make things right," Alan said desperately. "Serena is devastated. Her career is suffering by association. She had the least involvement in any of this, yet she's paying the heaviest price." "That's where you're wrong," Riggs replied. "I'm paying the heaviest price. I lost my wife, my children, and my trust in one coordinated betrayal." "What will it take to end this?" Alan asked finally. "Not for me. Not for Vanessa or Bradford. For Serena." Riggs studied the young man for a long moment. "There is one possibility." Hope flickered in Alan's eyes. "Anything. Divorce my daughter. Walk away completely. Return every gift, every advantage you gained through this marriage. Admit publicly that your relationship began as part of Bradford Coleman's strategy against me." The color drained from Alan's face. "You can't be serious. That would destroy Serena. No more than her participation destroyed me," Riggs interrupted. "Those are my terms. The only ones I'll offer." "She loves me," Alan said quietly. "And I love her." "Then you've both learned a valuable lesson about the cost of betrayal. Love built on deception isn't love at all. It's just another unstable structure waiting to collapse." After Alan left, Riggs received a call from Monroe Davidson. "The Sullivan matriarch is mobilizing her contacts. Several of your board members have received calls suggesting a vote of no confidence might be appropriate given recent events." "As expected," Riggs replied. "Implement Protocol D." That evening, every member of the Donovan Engineering Board received an encrypted file containing detailed evidence of their own past indiscretions. Evidence Riggs had systematically gathered over decades as insurance against exactly this type of power play. The threat was implicit but clear. Any move against Riggs would result in mutually assured destruction. By midnight, the attempted coup had been neutralized. The next morning brought news that Bradford Coleman had been formally charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. The evidence Riggs had compiled and strategically released to authorities had proven devastating. As Riggs watched the news coverage from his penthouse, his phone rang with Serena's number for the first time in days. "How could you ask Alan to divorce me?" she demanded when he answered, her voice raw with emotion. "I offered him a choice," Riggs corrected. "The same choice all of you had and squandered." "Dad, please," Serena begged, "in this. We're your family." "Family doesn't conspire against family," he replied quietly. "Family doesn't exclude family from milestone moments. Family doesn't betray family for personal gain." "I made a terrible mistake," Serena admitted, her voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting Mom. I thought you wouldn't be hurt if you never knew. But I didn't know. And the fact that you all thought I wouldn't discover it shows how little you understood me." The silence stretched between them. 30 years of father-daughter history cracking under the weight of recent betrayal. "I'll never forgive you for this," Serena finally said, her voice hardening. "That's your prerogative," Riggs replied evenly. "I made the same decision about all of you 2 weeks ago." After the call ended, Riggs stood at his window watching night fall over Boston. In the distance, the skeletal structure of the Horizon Tower rose against the darkening sky, a monument to precision, to careful planning, to uncompromising standards. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of his response to betrayal. Not a restoration. Some structures couldn't be salvaged once compromised, but a complete reconstruction on his terms alone. Chapter 8. New Foundations. 3 weeks after Serena's wedding, The systematic dismantling of everything Vanessa and Bradford had built together was nearly complete. Coleman Development teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, its stock essentially worthless. Vanessa's real estate firm had lost its license pending investigation. Tyler faced potential criminal charges for his role in financial improprieties. The social fallout was equally devastating. The Sullivan family, once untouchable in Boston society, found themselves isolated as former friends and allies distanced themselves from scandal. Invitations dried up, charitable boards requested resignations. Club memberships were quietly placed under review. It was precisely the moment Riggs had calculated would come, the point of maximum leverage. On a Thursday morning, he called an unexpected press conference at the construction site of the Horizon Tower. Media outlets, hungry for the next development in what the Boston Globe had dubbed the Donovan demolition, gathered eagerly beneath the towering steel framework. Riggs approached the podium, impeccable in a bespoke suit, his silver hair catching the sunlight. The cameras captured his expression, not vengeful or triumphant, but resolute. Professional. For 35 years, he began, I've built structures designed to last generations. The integrity of these buildings depends entirely on their foundations. When a foundation is compromised, the entire structure becomes unsafe. The reporters leaned forward, sensing this was more than a corporate announcement. 3 weeks ago, the foundation of my family was revealed to be compromised beyond repair. My response has been exactly what it would be to any structural failure. Careful assessment followed by controlled demolition to prevent further damage. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. Today, I'm announcing the formation of the Donovan Integrity Foundation with an initial endowment of $50 million. This foundation will support 2 causes. First, engineering scholarships for students demonstrating exceptional ethical standards. Second, resources for individuals rebuilding their lives after betrayal. The announcement sent ripples through the gathered press. This was not the continued vengeance they had expected. I will no longer comment on personal matters related to my former family members, Riggs continued. Their actions and the consequences have spoken for themselves. Instead, I will focus on building something new, something with a proper foundation. As questions erupted from the journalists, Riggs simply nodded once and walked away from the podium, ignoring the shouted queries about reconciliation, forgiveness, and whether this marked the end of his campaign against the Sullivans. Back in his office, he found Damon waiting. Bold move, his project manager commented. The foundation is a masterstroke, redirects the narrative entirely. It's not about the narrative, Riggs replied. It's about legacy. Speaking of legacy, Damon hesitated. Serena came by while you were at the press conference. She left this for you. He handed Riggs a small package. Inside was the silver compass Riggs had given his daughter on her first day of architecture school, along with a note in her precise handwriting. You taught me that true north never changes, no matter how lost you become. I lost my way. We all did. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll remember that I was once worthy of this compass. For a moment, something vulnerable crossed Riggs' face. Then he carefully placed the compass and note in his desk drawer. Will you reach out to her? Damon asked quietly. No, Riggs replied. Some structures can't be rebuilt. That evening, as Riggs worked late in his office, Monroe Davidson arrived with final documents requiring his signature. The divorce is complete, the attorney informed him. Vanessa receives nothing beyond what the law absolutely requires. The Sullivan family has withdrawn all attempts to influence your board. Bradford Coleman's legal team has approached us about a potential settlement to drop our civil claims. Decline, Riggs said immediately. I wanted to face the full consequences. Davidson nodded, then hesitated. There's one more thing. Your son has requested a private meeting. Not here, not at your residence, but on neutral ground. He was quite insistent. Riggs considered this unexpected development. Did he say why? Only that he has information you would want to hear directly from him. After Davidson left, Riggs stood at his office window, watching darkness fall over the city. The lights of his buildings glowed against the night sky, each structure a testament to his unwavering standards. After careful consideration, he texted Tyler, Boston Common, the bench by the Founders Monument. 8 a.m. tomorrow. The response came immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. Riggs slept little that night, reviewing the possible scenarios. Was this another trap? A desperate plea? A genuine attempt at atonement? By morning, he had prepared for every possibility. Boston Common was quiet at that early hour, mist rising from the grass as Riggs approached the designated meeting place. Tyler was already there, sitting alone on the bench, looking more like the boy Riggs remembered than the polished young businessman he had become. His son stood as he approached. Thank you for coming, Tyler said. Riggs nodded but didn't sit. You have information? Tyler took a deep breath. I do. About Bradford and Mom. About everything. He removed a flash drive from his pocket. This contains all their communications going back 3 years. Financial records. Plans. Everything they didn't want you to know. I already know everything I need to, Riggs replied. Not everything, Tyler insisted. You know they betrayed you. You know I helped them, but you don't know why. Greed, ambition, disloyalty. Riggs listed clinically. The motivations are irrelevant. It wasn't just an affair, Tyler continued desperately. They were systematically undermining your projects, creating structural inspection issues that didn't exist, spreading rumors to investors. They wanted to destroy Donovan Engineering completely, not just take your money. This was new information, and Riggs felt a cold anger rising. Explain. Bradford believed you had deliberately sabotaged his West Side Tower project 15 years ago, the one that had to be extensively redesigned after structural issues were discovered. I reported legitimate structural concerns, Riggs said firmly. The building would have been unsafe. I know that now, Tyler admitted. But Bradford convinced Mom that you had engineered the whole thing to humiliate him, that you'd been deliberately targeting his projects for years. Their relationship began as revenge against you, and it evolved into a plan to systematically dismantle everything you'd built. Riggs took this in silently, the pieces rearranging themselves in his mind. And you believe this? Tyler looked down. I wanted to believe I was protecting your legacy, not destroying it. Bradford convinced me that you had made powerful enemies who were going to bring you down. That this way, at least the family would survive with some assets intact. Why tell me this now? Because I was wrong, Tyler said simply. Because watching you these past weeks, your precision, your resolve, reminded me who you really are. Not the monster Bradford painted, but the father who taught me that integrity isn't negotiable. Riggs studied his son's face for any sign of deception and found only exhaustion and regret. This changes nothing, Riggs finally said. The betrayal remains the same, regardless of motivation. I know, Tyler replied. I don't expect forgiveness. But you deserve the truth, and I couldn't live with myself knowing I'd let their lies stand unchallenged. As Tyler turned to leave, Riggs spoke again. The structural issues in Coleman's Tower 15 years ago, they weren't my opinion. They were fact. The building would have collapsed within a decade. I believe you, Tyler said quietly. I should have all along. Riggs watched his son walk away, the flash drive heavy in his hand. He had what he needed now, the final piece of the puzzle, the underlying cause of the structural failure that had destroyed his family. It changed nothing, and yet, as he walked back through the morning mist, Riggs felt something shift within him. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps a certain completion. The blueprint of betrayal was now fully revealed. His response would remain exactly as planned. Precise. Comprehensive. Final. Chapter 9. Immovable Structure. 1 year after Serena's wedding, the Boston skyline had been permanently altered, both literally and figuratively. The Horizon Tower had been completed ahead of schedule, its innovative design winning international acclaim. Donovan Engineering had not only recovered from the scandal, but had emerged stronger, with a reputation for uncompromising integrity that attracted premium clients worldwide. In contrast, the remnants of Bradford Coleman's empire had been sold off piece by piece in bankruptcy proceedings. The man himself was serving the first year of a 12-year sentence for financial crimes, his meteoric rise and catastrophic fall already the subject of a best-selling business expose. Vanessa had retreated to a modest apartment in Providence, Rhode Island, as far from Boston society as she could manage while remaining in New England. The divorce had left her with only the legal minimum of assets, her reputation in tatters, her social standing evaporated. The Sullivan family had maintained their wealth, but lost significant influence. Lillian, now in declining health, had withdrawn from public life entirely. On a clear autumn morning exactly 1 year after the wedding debacle, Riggs stood in his penthouse office reviewing the final proposal for his next major project, a revolutionary medical research facility that would bear the Donovan name. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Donovan, there's a Ms. Serena Pierce here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Riggs paused. He hadn't spoken to his daughter since their phone conversation 11 months earlier. "Send her in." Serena entered, her steps hesitant. She looked both familiar and changed, thinner, her eyes carrying a wariness that hadn't been there before. But she also stood straighter with a determination that reminded Riggs of himself. "Thank you for seeing me," she began. "What can I do for you?" Riggs asked neutrally. Serena placed a portfolio on his desk. "I'm here professionally. My firm is bidding on the Robertson Museum expansion. I understand Donovan Engineering is consulting on structural elements." Riggs raised an eyebrow. "You're not with Pierce Architectural anymore?" "No," she replied evenly. "I started my own firm 6 months ago. Alan and I are divorced." This was news to Riggs, though he kept his expression unchanged. "I see. I'm not using the Donovan name professionally," Serena continued. "I want to succeed or fail on my own merits. But I am my father's daughter in one respect. I don't compromise on structural integrity." Riggs opened the portfolio and reviewed her proposal with a professional eye. The design was innovative, bold, yet fundamentally sound. It showed the same attention to underlying support systems that had always defined his own work. "It's good," he acknowledged. "Better than good." "Thank you." Serena maintained her professional demeanor. "That's all I came to present. I don't expect personal reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I learned the most important lesson you taught me. Foundations matter." As she turned to leave, Riggs spoke. "Tyler provided me with evidence of Bradford and your mother's true intentions. Their plan to systematically undermine my projects. Did you know about that aspect?" Serena turned back, genuine shock on her face. "No, I knew about the affair, about their financial plans. But sabotaging your buildings? Never." Riggs nodded, believing her. The Donovan Integrity Foundation is funding a scholarship program for architectural students focusing on structural engineering. The selection committee could use someone with both architectural and engineering perspective. It wasn't forgiveness. Riggs Donovan didn't believe in forgiveness for betrayal, but it was perhaps the first stone of a different kind of structure. "I'd be honored to serve on the committee," Serena replied carefully. "Professionally speaking." Professionally, Riggs agreed. "The personal remains as it is." After Serena left, Damon entered the office. "Was that my daughter's architectural proposal?" Riggs cut him off. "Quite impressive. Structurally sound." Damon nodded, understanding the subtext. "Any others?" "Any contact?" "Vanessa attempted to reach me through her attorney last month. Something about reconsidering the financial settlement. I declined. Tyler has accepted a position in Seattle with a development firm unconnected to either Coleman or Sullivan interests. We've had no direct contact since his revelation in the park." "And you're satisfied with this outcome?" Damon asked carefully. Riggs turned to the window, gazing out at the city where his buildings stood as testaments to his uncompromising standards. The horizon tower dominated the skyline, its silhouette distinctive and unmistakable. Unlike the family he had lost, these structures would endure for generations. "Satisfaction isn't relevant," he replied finally. "Identified a structural failure, implemented the appropriate response, and rebuilt what could be salvaged. The rest was unsalvageable." "Some might call that cold," Damon observed. "Some might call it precise," Riggs countered. "I can work with Serena professionally. I can acknowledge Tyler's eventual honesty. But trust, once broken, cannot be fully restored. That's not emotion, it's engineering. Later that evening, as Riggs reviewed the day's work in his penthouse, his phone chimed with a message from Serena. Committee meeting scheduled for November 15th. Professional opportunity only. Boundaries understood and respected. He replied with characteristic brevity. Confirmed. Riggs Donovan stood at his window, watching lights illuminate his buildings across the Boston skyline. Each structure represented his unwavering commitment to integrity, to building things that would stand long after the builder was gone. His family had failed that test. His work never would. The betrayal had changed him, certainly, made him harder, more vigilant. But it hadn't broken him, as they had perhaps intended. Instead, it had revealed the true structural integrity of Maxwell Riggs Donovan, a man who, when the foundations failed, didn't collapse but instead rebuilt on bedrock. Uncompromising, unyielding, immovable, just as he had always been designed to be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.